We're live. This is going to be great, I think. The art of the difficult conversation. And you'll notice that even the mention of the difficult conversation has people scared. Remember, last couple of weeks we had way more people in class. Tonight, they're like, oh, I don't even want to think about it. I don't want to know how to have it. I don't want to stress out about this. The difficult conversation is too scary. So let's talk about it. This will be mostly like a normal kind of talk, but if we have enough time, we might open it up to discussion of different types of conversations that might be difficult and kind of how to do that. So when I say difficult conversation, I mean the conversation that's in your mind right now that is the one that you've been putting off with somebody because you are afraid of it. You might be afraid of how it's going to go. Like you might be afraid of the wrath of that conversation itself. So I'll give you an example of this. Before I started practicing martial arts, because I would have been far more mindful than this would have never happened to me during martial arts. But before martial arts, I was set to go to Taiwan to go on a trip with one of my best friends who is from Taiwan. And we were very excited to go. I had everything set. I had my plane tickets bought, everything. And then the day before the trip, I realized that my passport is expired. And I'm in like high school at this point, and I'm really bummed, but mostly I am dead afraid to tell my friend because she has a fiery attitude. She will have like a vengeance like no other. So I literally was too afraid to call her. And this is a joke that we have to this day, I had the travel agent call her and tell her that I couldn't come because I was too afraid to talk to her. And let me tell you, if I had just called her, she wouldn't be able to make fun of me 20 years later, 25 years later. So call your friends yourself to tell them you're not going on the trip. It might be that you're afraid of how the conversation will affect your relationship with that person, or you might be afraid of what they're going to think of you after the conversation is over. I think that's a little bit more common than being afraid of the conversation itself, but both pretty common. In fear, as martial artists, we are learning to not let fear stop us. Fear can inform us. Fear can make us make better decisions and think things through, but it's not going to stop us. And that's the problem, is that usually fear stops us. And the difficult conversation usually never happens. We just hope that it goes away. We hope that it just takes care of itself, and that never happens. If this is enough of a thing that it requires a difficult conversation, it will not disappear until one or both of you is dead. And so if you don't want to wait that long, you got to have it now. So don't let fear stop you from having it. It could be so many different things. So I did write down some examples. It could be like you have to confess something, like your passport is expired. It could be like an apology that you need to make to somebody else, or it could be that you need to ask somebody for an apology. Could be that you're asking for anything that you want, but it's like you're afraid of doing this. I'll give you a great example of this one. I was moving from Michigan to California many years ago, and I knew this, and I had told my Sifu. I told him, in 3 years from now, I'm moving to California. And he's like, okay, this is what I want from you over the next 3 years, and I'm going to help you get ready to run your own school there and all of this. And what I needed, besides all of the amazing things that I was getting and the great training that I was getting, what I needed was a little bit of the financial information so that I could decide like how much I needed for a loan and set up the business plan part of it. But I was too afraid to ask. And this was at a point in my life where, even more so than now, I did not like asking for help for things. I'm kind of okay with it now, but I was abysmal then, terrible. And so I didn't ask for help. Instead, I went into like the software that we used for accounting, and I sent a profit and loss statement to my brother, which I should not have done. And when I was doing it, I kind of thought like, I should probably ask before I do this. But I did it anyways. And they found out and they brought me in, and Sifu and the other staff who was like ahead of me really chewed me out. And I was like, so I was not great about the whole situation. And I did feel terrible, but I was also, we're kind of veering into the part where I'm going to give some suggestions of how to deal with it. But I was very forthcoming once they called me out on it. And I was like, it's because I'm not good at asking for help. And everybody totally understood that. But then I went a little bit too far with my being forthcoming and being vulnerable, and I started to cry a little bit. And I'm not the kind of person who cries very much unless it's like a good movie or like a really sad commercial. Super Bowl, I cry all the time from the commercials. But I don't usually cry with people in my life because sad stuff doesn't happen to me. But I was like kind of crying about it, and it veered off the edge of vulnerability into manipulation. I was kind of like manipulating them with my tears, which I had to admit to in a separate difficult conversation like 10 years later. I was like, I've been thinking about this ever since it happened. And I think I was kind of manipulative. I'm not sure if I was doing it on purpose or not. And Sifu Brown was like, I think you're doing it on purpose. And I was like, okay. In any case, it could be like asking for something that you want from somebody who you're really afraid of asking for something from. It could be that you're giving bad news for the other person, and it could be like you're giving them bad news about themselves or about that person, or bad news just from general life. Could be a breakup, could be an intervention. So all of these are difficult conversations. Very few of these are just like, oh, intervention, that's easy. It's like it takes something, right? And all of these can take different forms, but they have a lot of things in common. And the main things that they have in common is that we should actually listen, because it's a conversation. It's not just me telling you what I need to get off of my chest. And you'll notice that as soon as you start actually listening to what's going on with the other person, then it actually takes a lot of the pressure and the difficulty off of what's going on in your mind, because instead of being all stressed about the things that you have to say and being worried about what you think they're going to say or what you think they are going to feel, you just actually experience it. And this makes it so much easier. So actually listening, very important. And this is important with any conversation, with being a great partner in the dojo, whether you're doing it in Tai Chi or Kung Fu or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's the same basic thing. You don't just like go one-sided, go. You feel, right? Your partner's pushing, then you can feel that and you can pull and you kind of have a back and forth. So if you are learning how to be a great partner in the dojo, then that's going to help you be a great partner outside. And to listen, it might not literally be listening to what they're saying. It could just be recognizing their body language, but it's recognizing what's going on with them. Along with listening to them, you got to be totally honest. If you are holding on to things and not actually coming out with what is, and I don't mean honest like this, like I got a problem with Zelda, and me being honest is I got a problem with you. That's not it. So I'll give you an example. We had kind of a difficult conversation for me the other day because Zelda tested for yellow sash and killed it. She was awesome, and she gave a wonderful paper. And that's another situation where I cry all the time, is during papers. When other people are giving their papers, not usually when I'm giving a paper, but sometimes. So she read a paper that she wrote for her yellow sash test, and before she said a single word of her paper, she started crying. And in part of her paper, she was talking about how not everything can last, and this too shall pass. And she was kind of talking about how someday she won't be able to be at the dojo possibly. And I was like, oh, are you leaving like sometime soon? Have you thought about this? And so I kind of confronted her about it at the park the other day because I wanted to know, are you leaving soon? Because that would be devastating. We would miss you so much, and we love having you on staff as a student, all of that. And the way that the first thought, and this is the problem that most people have with a difficult conversation, is the first thought I had was, Zelda's leaving. Oh crap, what does that mean about me? I'm going to have to hire somebody else and train them. They're never going to be as good as her. The dojo's going to fail, and I'm going to, be in such a terrible position because it's all about me. So that's my first thought. And it is important to bring that up, but then to be totally honest takes it a little bit further than that. Because if I'm totally honest about what is truly important to me, what's more important than it being hard for me, which is very important, is how is it for her, and how is it for the students, and how is it for the school? And so instead of me just saying, approaching the conversation from the standpoint of, when are you going to leave? And let's talk about the logistics of and all of that and all that. It's more like, this is what it would mean for me. I would really miss you, and I would have to do a lot more work. And the students would definitely miss you, and the school would not be as good of a place. And so I don't think that I changed your mind about anything, because that was not the point of the conversation. Actually, this is the third most important part. Is you can't have an agenda, and you can't try to manipulate people. Hence why you can't cry when you're asking for something. So you got to listen, you got to be totally honest, and you can't have an agenda, and you can't be trying to manipulate. And that really goes hand in hand with, really all three of these go hand in hand. If you're listening, then you don't have an agenda, because you're actually just there for what's going on, right? If you are being totally honest, there's no agenda there, because you're being totally honest, and you might tell them what your agenda is, but then also get past that to what's more important. So these are, I'm sure there are more components, but these are the three that we'll stick with tonight, because we don't want to overload you with too much stuff to remember. But listen, honesty, and no agenda. If you enter into the conversation thinking, like if I go into it thinking, I got to convince Zelda to stay forever, that's going to be so obvious. It will not work. She's going to be more likely to leave earlier. So instead, the conversation is like, so what's going on? What exactly are you thinking? How are you feeling about this? How can we help? If there's a goal that you have. And this was like when I had my conversation with Sifu Brown. I'm sure he wasn't happy, because I was an incredible staff member. I was not half as good as Zelda is. I'm sure he was not thinking like, oh no, the dojo's going to fail as soon as he leaves. But he also was probably not really relishing the opportunity to train a new staff member and do all that crap. So when I told him, and he heard it, and he really listened to me, he went in the direction of, okay, great. So how can we help, and how can we get the most out of the time that you have here? 3 years is a long time. You can still get a lot from both directions in that amount of time. So this is going to not really directly relate to most of your experiences, as those of you who have not worked at the dojo don't have the opportunity to have this great conversation with me. But it is certainly related to some other kind of professional conversation that you might have with somebody. But let's get even more into the nitty gritty. Let's talk about an apology. An apology is a great, difficult conversation that most people are absolutely terrible at having. And most people's idea of an apology is this. When I was a kid, this is a true story, I came home from work. I came home from school one day, and I was pissed. I had so much homework. I had a bad day at school. I wasn't having any of it. And I took these pebbles. We had a gravel driveway, and I took pebbles and I started chucking it at the garage because I was just pissed and needed to get it out. And I was throwing them pretty close to the window of the garage, and I pretty much knew that I was going to break the window if I kept throwing rocks, but I did not stop myself from throwing rocks. It took me like 20 rocks or 30 rocks, but I finally broke the window. I broke the window, and I was like, oh crap. And so then I walked inside, and started doing my homework. And my aunt, who was taking care of me at that time, was kind of like my pseudo babysitter too. She, I think, heard that the window was broken, and she came in and she was like, Ryan, did you see what happened to the window in the garage? And I was like, no, but I saw a bad looking kid walking down the street, and I'm pretty sure that he might have done it. I was like 10 years old at this point. And she said, oh, really? He's like, could not have been more blatantly a lie. And she knew it right away. And I did have to confess to my parents about it. But my apology at that point was something along the lines of, I'm sorry. Like, that's it. And of course, you don't expect much more from a 10-year-old, but you should expect more from yourself and from somebody else who is a full-fledged adult who can actually communicate and do things well. So here's what a real apology would have looked like if I could travel back in time and teach my 10-year-old self how to apologize. It would be like this. There are also 3 components to a good apology. They're not the same components, but they're related to the same components as a great difficult conversation. So one is you have to explain what you know the understanding was, what was expected of you. For me, what was expected of me was to not break windows in my house. And I would have to explain, I knew that breaking the window was wrong, and that you, my parents, expected me to not throw rocks at the house and break windows. That's number one, is you admit what the understanding or the kind of agreement, whether it's spoken or unspoken, was. And the second one is, here's what happened. So it's like, here was the understanding, here's what actually happened. I know I wasn't supposed to break windows, I broke the window. It's important to have those 2 parts. The third part is the most missing in these conversations that are apologies that I see. You admit that it was wrong, and then that's like where you stop. But where you got to go next is, these are the steps that I'm taking to make sure that it doesn't happen again, and or the steps that I'm taking to make up for it, right? So for me in this case, it would be like, I'm going to have to work until I save up enough money to pay for the window. And I'm going to make sure that I never break another window, because if I get angry after I have a hard day at school, I'm just going to punch my pillow instead of throwing rocks at the house or something like that. Okay. So what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, and what you're going to do to make sure that that doesn't happen again, or what you're doing to make up for it. And the beautiful thing about this apology is, along with maybe an additional listening to what the other person's experience is, which is also a great crucial step for this, it disappears. The whole thing is gone in most circumstances. Now, there can be a circumstance where you've broken somebody's trust so wholly that just explaining what happened and what you'll do to make up for it might not actually make it disappear. But in the vast majority of cases, this will be it. It's all you need to do, right? So, you messed something up with the dojo, you didn't get somebody's phone number, or you killed the plant or whatever, you just follow those steps and then we're great. Don't kill the plant. You'll notice how in that kind of that methodology is built in opportunities to be honest and opportunities to listen. You just, well, it's not built into that, but you should listen. So if somebody, after you apologize, has something to say, you should invite them to say it. And they might not start offering, but you might be like, how do you feel about all of this? And that would be great too. It's important to basically understand what somebody's experiencing. In fact, that's going to lead me into another little bit. So this is not necessarily the way that you might think of a difficult conversation, because the way we've been talking about it, it's like a premeditated thing. It's like I've got this thing that I've been holding on to, and I've been afraid to have this conversation, and so I haven't done it yet. But this could also be somebody is bringing something to you, and it might be that something terrible is going on in their life, or they're very upset about something that you've done, or whatever it is. And maybe it requires an apology, maybe it requires something else. But just being able to listen to what the other person says, just literally sitting there and making eye contact and nodding your head will go a long way, but it is usually not enough, and definitely not as much as you could do. So the next step to this would be you actually repeat what the person said to make sure that they know that you are listening to them, and you repeat, you explain what you believe the emotional kind of state behind what they're saying is. So, Zelda's like, I killed a plant. It's dead. I tried to water it. I watered it so much that it drowned, and now it's dead. And so I say, okay, I got it. And then she's in tears because this was my favorite plant that she killed. So I say, I got it. You killed the plant. You watered it so much that it drowned, and now it's dead. And what you're feeling is, and let me make sure that I'm getting this right, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you're feeling terrible. You feel sad about it. You feel worried about how I'm going to take this. You just feel awful because you love plants, yet you just can't handle keeping them alive. And I say, like, is that right? Is that how you're feeling? And it is, yes, that's right. Or yes, but also you missed the part where I really hate plants, actually. So you explain, like, you literally, the best way to do this I have found is you literally repeat word for word what they said, and then you put behind it, this is what your emotional state is. And this could seem like, from the way that I'm explaining it, like a very cold, could be a manipulative way of doing this. It's the opposite. It is fully understanding somebody and making sure that they feel like they are fully understood. And there is, in many cases, no better way that you could help somebody through something, and no better gift that you could give somebody than to fully hear them and understand what their experience is. This is something that is sorely missing for so many of us in our experience of life and our relationships. So do that, practice it. I've kind of touched on almost everything that I was going to talk about. Yeah, yeah. So all of these kind of follow the same three, have to have the same three components: being, listening, being totally honest, and not having an agenda. If you're planning your conversation, and I'm sure some of you after tonight's talk are going to be so inspired that you have to go out and have this conversation tonight, great. Don't over plan it, because over planning is just another excuse for putting it off, right? You're going to go home tonight and think, yeah, let me spend a long time thinking about exactly what I'm going to say. Well, as soon as you open your mouth, it's all going to go out the window anyway. Just go into it with the understanding of, I'm not going to have any kind of agenda. I'm not going to try to drag any baggage in. This is one of the biggest problems that people have, is they assume they know how the conversation is going to go because they're attached to an idea of who that person is and how they're going to respond to it. All of that, just let go of it, right? And just kind of bring that honesty, bring that listening, and have no agenda at all. The best time to have it is as soon as class is over, call this person. And I will say, in my experience, and I used to be the furthest away from being the kind of person who would have this kind of conversation. I was so non-confrontational. I would avoid it like it was going to kill me. And now that I kind of have the flip side attitude towards them, I love having these difficult conversations. And it's not that I don't have any fear. That would be ridiculous. It's that I know that as soon as I have it, then I don't have to worry about it anymore. And there is such a wonderful feeling that accompanies this. Once you're done getting this off your chest and you have more likely than not repaired this relationship with this person, whether it's a very deep thing or it's a more surface kind of relationship you have, it feels great. You don't have to worry about having the conversation. You don't have to worry about what this person thinks about you anymore, because built into the conversation is knowing how they feel and explaining how you feel and all of that. So it's wonderful. One of the best things you can do before having a difficult conversation is to meditate. And it is precisely because it is the practice of letting go. So you let go of the baggage that you have with this person. You let go of the attachments to the way you think it's going to go or the way you think that it has to go. You create this wide open space, and then you just kind of step into it. And from that wide open space, anything is possible. And this, what occurs for us as being a very difficult, scary conversation that we dread, and we are only thinking about all the negative ways that it could go down and all the terrible repercussions. What we think of that can very easily transform into the best conversation you have ever had with this person. It can, in fact, transform your whole relationship and make it wonderful. It can bring you closer to them. It can just open up so many great things. So the only way it's going to happen is if you are actually listening and you are actually coming in without an agenda. So meditation, again, will help us kind of get ready for that. You might recognize that this conversation is not going well, and that will happen sometimes, even if you have the absolute best intentions, and even if you are doing like all of the best stuff and you're being totally honest and you're listening and all that. Some people are still not going to be ready to have the conversation on the other side. So don't make them wrong for that. Don't make yourself wrong for having the conversation with them in the first place. You might need to just table it and recognize, like, it seems like we're not going to come to any kind of a solution in this conversation. So let's come back to it at another time. It's great if you actually set that time so you know when it's going to be. And then go and meditate, go and journal about it, whatever you need to do to kind of get it straight. But being able to let go and just be in the present is it. There's no better way to be in any kind of conversation or in any experience you're having with another person. There's no better way to be than just here, with nothing in the way, with no attachments, with no agenda, nothing. So when you meditate, sometimes you'll have an agenda with yourself. You'd be like, this is going to be the best meditation, or I'm a terrible person. It's like, I got to sit here totally still and have a great meditation, or I'm not doing it right. You want to let go of that. If you have an agenda with your meditation, that's going to cause the meditation to feel forced and to just not be, in general, a good meditation. So just let it go. Let go of any kind of preconception. You drag your baggage in. You're like, last time I was here, the cops drove by and it was the loudest thing ever and it was the worst meditation. I bet that's going to happen this time. And then instead of meditating, you're sitting there just thinking about waiting for the sirens to come again. All that stuff, just let it go and listen. Meditation can be like listening. In fact, my Sifu likes to say, if prayer is like speaking to God, meditation is like listening to God. And you can listen to God, you can listen to yourself or the universe or whatever you believe in or whatever you're trying to connect to. And you can literally just listen to your breath. And maybe it's not, if your breath is really loud, that's going to disturb other people's meditation. But just like the feeling, the listening to your body, that can be one of the best internal conversations that you'll ever have. So let's practice. Sit comfortably. Oh, close eyes, spine straight, eyes upturned, relax, watch the breath. Let go of all thoughts, worries, and cares. Be here now. If your mind wanders, let it go. You can just label the thought as thought without any judgment. Let it go and return gently back to the breath and just listen. Just feel. Nothing in the way, no judgment, just awareness.